I'm Jana. I've been with Infor since 2017. um, I'm in product management now, but some of you guys might know me from GPS, from consulting, and then some might know me from when I was a customer of Infor's for about 20 years. So, what we're going to talk about today is CU release planning. I know we don't say CU anymore, but old habits die hard. This presentation is something I'm excited about. It was influenced by some of you guys, peers, if you will. There was a great presentation done by Legacy Health and Cooper at Infor Connect. So for those of you guys that were not able to attend, we are going to incorporate some of their lessons learned, what we know at Infor, and then at the end, I will answer any questions that I can, and if not, I can follow up and get back to you guys in the community. So if that sounds good, we'll get started. Just quick note, while I'm presenting, I cannot see the chat, but don't hesitate to put questions out there. We can circle back to them after we finish with the review and demonstration. All right, so it's a lot here. It's a lot to CU releases, and we wanted to make this not just high level, but really relevant. So why does this matter? How can we make this a more meaningful approach? What have your peers, like I mentioned, Legacy Health and Cooper, learned that apply to this testing strategy? How do you test? Testing integrations, and then governance. And then we're going to have a couple of examples of what that really means. So let's get started. I'll let this stay up here for a second. We all know release testing starts with release notes, but those are, just the overarching information. It really requires each individual organization to assess, test, decide, and adopt. And I think this is starting off really where I want to kind of lay the landscape. Those release notes, they include fixes, updates, compliance, as well as new features. And that matters because those new features are where you get value and ongoing value for the platform. The fixes and the updates and the regulatory, those are mandatory things to keep the business stable. So we have stability, we have growth, we have enhancements, all in those documents, which is why operationalizing releases is so important. And it's one of the reasons why we also discussed it at Infor Connect. So what's that really look like? We're going to monitor. And for today's conversation, when we talk about monitor and where we're going to put our focus, it's really going to be on those big biannual CUs. Or, sorry, not supposed to say that anymore, release notes. So correct me. We're really going to talk about those biannual, but we know we get monthly updates as well. So just a takeaway from here, you can always scale this down for monthly updates. But these are really those biannual CUs that should be part of your organizational strategic planning at the beginning, end of year, around benefits, around regulatory updates, anything around finance, those types of things. So they're going to start with the release notes. And then again, lessons learned from your peers and from what we have seen be successful, creating a risk matrix. What poses a risk if we don't test this? So that's in that category of bugs, regulatory updates. How are we going to make sure that we test this? We don't find any regressions. And then how are we going to get approval? Now that's a little bit of a different concept, right? Because what are we approving? Especially for releases, those updates are coming unless they're toggleable features. Well, one thing that we learned, and it was good feedback, was those internal governance models determine how you classify exceptions when they're found, how you interact with Infor, what your internal workaround processes are. So although code updates may be coming or configurations to respond, the way you internally manage those really, we've seen from customers, have really been beneficial to have those processes and those governance bodies in places. And then this is just, again, what do we really mean when we say release? Two camps, if you will. It's the bug fix testing and then the new feature testing. Stability, strategic. So there really are two ways that we look at releases, and we've seen organizations successfully look at releases. So let's start with release notes and your risk radar for bugs, defects, regulatory. This is so important. And if you guys take a screenshot or we share it afterwards, the reason why I really want to take some time here is, again, what we learned from your peers. They use words like this to create automation tools within their organizations. So they load in the release notes, and then words or signals like this, they're able to quickly filter on, look at the module, create assignments, send out communication. Now, they did not do that overnight. This was something that was an iterative process, but knowing what the key things to focus on in the releases, in the communication from Infor to you guys is key to how they got to an automated platform. So it's very relevant. Obviously, we all kind of know what these words are. There, if you haven't done this, maybe go back and look at some older release notes and see if you can kind of start to illuminate some of those trends and where they might be able to align with you guys creating risk matrix. What's also important about this is if it doesn't fall to the top of the radar, there are lower things to worry about or things to not worry about at all. Those documents, especially in those biannuals, are huge, right? It's a lot to get through. It's why I opened up saying this should be part of your overall annual governance and strategic year over year, strategic planning year over year. So what have we seen be successful? And successful, as with anything, you'll hear me talk a little bit sometimes about our COAT guiding principles, right? Mutually beneficial guiding principles. One of the great things about Infor is, we deliver you a product that will work for your business. We don't ask your business to work for our product. But when we communicate, knowing where things are in terms of priority is huge. So when we talk to or we see customers or we look at support cases, when we see structures like this and communications like this, it's categorized as high for their organization. Well, we want to know, what does high mean, right? Medium, low. How did you get to that assessment? Uh-oh. Did I miss a slide? I missed the slide. We'll get back to it in just a second. I'm pretty sure I have a defining what those means in here. Hopefully it pops up. If not, we'll go back and we'll add it in. I'll stop sharing. What resources are you using? You're using, so here's some of the KBs, how the dates for deployment, and we'll talk a little bit about dates shortly. Known customer impact issues. I'm going to circle back to that in just a second. There's a preparing for multi-tenant feature release that we share. There's our innovation insights, and then our clinical bridge and OS updates. So this is how we're getting information out to you. You can subscribe to these, get alerts, etc. What else is important? Again, the known customer impacts is kind of huge. This is also where I want to raise my hand as an Inforian and say, we do have some lessons learned on where we can expand and be more thoughtful about how we're communicating known customer impacts. Every issue doesn't impact every customer. So giving some more use cases, adding some additional context to, you have to have this set of data in this order at this time in order to produce this result. That is something that we're working on maturing as well. So what are some just high level lessons learned? Testing time compressed, right? It's reaction versus what I'm going to continue to hammer home, blocking those testing windows. Integration skipped. A lot of times integrations get skipped not because we don't test integrations, but because we don't have a comprehensive inventory. Toggles enabled and untested. They seem sometimes really innocuous, right? Obvious words and answers. That's not always the case. And then no named owner. That's going to be huge. Who's the functional SME? Who's the technical SME? Are they communicating? And then that goes down to silos. Do you have silos? Do you have a prescript deployment where your functional and technical teams share scripts? Are those scripts updated? Who's actually doing the testing? Who's looking at the updates? So this is where we're going to drive down. I believe that slide that I was looking for is here, right? That criticality. How do we know what that looks like? So again, having that language that goes with the activity is critical, especially if you're communicating out internally and to Infor. This is just kind of a matrix of what's the disruption on the top, what's the impact along the side, to land to what's the testing effort, right? We hear customers sometimes say, man, this is just so much to test. Well, that could be true if we're looking at everything as a critical impact and high disruption. Then we're probably over engineering some of those processes. Or it could be on the other side. We may be under engineering. So having a matrix like this, looking at the releases and then applying where does this fit, it really helps manage the level of effort. It also helps, especially with timing, and we'll talk a little bit about this for our team members, for our customers that don't have a pre-prod. Timing is essential. So staying mission critical, this is a way to filter and sort through those updates. What's important and how to test. So this is just a quick example of what would it look like to have testing scripts, a body of testing scripts. What do those scenarios look like? These are those repeatable business processes that are unique to you. I always say, Infor, we supply this technology, this tool for you to use. How you're swinging the hammer is completely unique to every organization. So those things that are super specific to your organization. Hey, we match on Social Security wages after 50, after the limit is reached up to another, $10,000. That's not something that is generic across our landscape, but you testing that surely could expose an additional flaw, an exception. Those are the types of cases that we want to ensure you have in your body of catalog. The other thing that I want to focus on here is that the cases remain updated and that you have that information. I think that's extremely critical to timing. Like with everything else, things age out, new things are applied. So make sure that when you have this body of work that your scripts stay updated for your testing. The other thing is, once you get this out and get this repeatable, there are tools that can automate some of these things. Or like with anything else, the more you do it, the faster you go. The last thing I want to point out here is that ownership is important. Who's doing what, when, where? This is also important in a lesson learned, again, from Connect, from your peers at Cooper and Legacy. Their owners also allowed them to leverage automation. Things come in. I think one of them had a SharePoint set up. The SharePoint had a list of owners, the module, the criticality, shoots off an email, has tracking, all of those things. Again, after they were able to refine their process, elevated their experience and their efficiency. Here's what I was looking for. Oftentimes, we test for the happy path. And that's not the direction we necessarily want to go. We actually want to test to expose a exception. If there are things that challenge you in your day to day, which we all know that we have those things, it may be, procuring supply chain from a particular vendor. It may be dates retro dating. It may be negative entries in the GL. It could be a host of things. Once we test, again, going back to those test scripts, and not if, but when you find an exception, right? We don't want you to ever get comfortable. It's a reason why our iPhones and our Androids get updates every month too. This is technology. So when you find an exception, the criticality, right? We said high, medium, low. Here's what that means, or critical, high, medium, low. From your organization standpoint, is it stopping you from doing something? Is it adding an amount of time that is not sustainable for production? Is it a nice to have or a feature that introduced an exception and you have a workaround and you want to monitor it while you open up a support case? These are the things that, from your perspective in your organization with this release testing, we can clearly see that how that translates to support cases. And it's very important because if you have something that's disruptive and it's adding 2 hours worth of time and you have no workaround, but the case comes in as medium, it's not going to get the attention it needs from Infor. But if you add context like what is here in, we've done this assessment and this is critical because there's no acceptable alternative, our path is blocked and we will have delayed processing, those cues to us and the severity that matches it automatically allows us to operate faster. It eliminates a lot of the back and forth. So again, going back to that, our guiding principle, mutually beneficial when you have infrastructure like this for your release testing. Just a little bit more here, a little bit more context. Again, we're going to share this, but these are kind of the hard numbers, again, of relating status to impact and having that baseline, having that ability to quickly do an assessment because you have the standards established. Now, here's what I also love to add. We have probably have a couple of different um, resource types represented here, right? You have functional, you have technical, and then where those integrations come into this, right? We need the integrations to do our functional work, but they're highly technical. So this is just integration points, what they look like from the Infor tooling, and what to check for these points when there are releases, especially releases, these biannual releases. Do columnars need to be replicated? Are there new fields? That's a huge finding, right? Are your ion connections and your ion desk healthy? Is there it are your updates flowing over to burst as we would expect? So these core integrations could have impacts, and that goes back to what are those things that we're looking for on those release notes that may highlight risk. Those translate not only to our business practices, but also to our integrations. Talk a little bit about cab, right? And cab is something that our customers establish, right? It's a change advisory board internally. Some customers have them, some customers don't. I will tell you, customers that have them usually have a better experience. And what we see their cab um, participants doing is, again, going back to that two-pronged approach. They do absolutely have a presence in bug fixes, but they also have a very strategic presence in new feature adoption. And new feature adoption, again, if you're not planning this, if you don't have a strategic outlook, if you're not monitoring what new features are coming out, You can truly be diminishing the value. It's like driving the car off the lot and you're diminishing the value because you're not, getting the brakes done and the tires rotated or adding the new features. Or I have a EV, taking the the over the airwaves updates, right? Cab necessarily on bug fixes. It's not a go live. You're not implementing anything new, but you absolutely are having new code introduced. And if there is an exception, how you handle that, customers that have change advisory boards operate very efficiently with dealing with both sides of this equation. And to that point, how do we actually start with that? So there is, and we're going to start getting into timing and examples. There are two profiles when we think about this. There are customers that have pre-production, and then there are customers that don't have pre-production. Said directly, pre-production, you're getting a preview to code changes early. They're about 30 days early. Without pre-production, sometimes that window can be much smaller um, between when it impacts production. On an earlier slide, I showed where you can see where those deployments are scheduled. They usually start on the second or third Friday of the month over that weekend, and then you would have your new features or your code updates on that Monday. So imagine if you don't have pre-production, update starts on Thursday and Monday is payroll Monday, or you're in healthcare, you come in and there are changes for supply chain and getting information, or it's month end close, right? So this does make a difference in how you prepare and test. I'll let this stay up for a quick second. This is just a template, an example. We took March and April of 2026, and all of the things that we're talking about, we funneled it down into a real calendar. Who's doing what when? And what you'll see when we get to this calendar is we're still doing our day-to-day operations, which goes back to what I was saying earlier. Come November, December of this year, I would highly recommend, and we see again with cabs and customers that have Infor change advisory boards or strategic boards, planning. What is March and April going to look like? What is September and October going to look like? This is kind of what that model is going to show us. Before we start that and we get to the calendar, one of the most important things, whether it's pre-prod or even if you don't have pre-prod, is making sure you have your environment ready to test. Scheduling your copy for production to non-prod. And this is a little bit of an art and a science. It's not just picking the date based off of the release. It's picking the date and the time based off of factors of when and how data will be in the system. So it's important, look at your release notes. What data do you want in the system based off of what's there collectively across the board? And then picking that refresh time, right? Is it month end close? Do we want to copy before close? Is payroll running? Is what are the statuses of potentially I think we have Cloverleaf as an example. All of those things need to be factored in to the timing and when it is a good, it'll never be perfect, but when there is a sample that will allow us to target data from refreshes from production to test. All right, I'll let this stay up again just for a quick second. So in this example, we're assuming that there's pre-prod, right? We're saying the release notes are available. And what immediately starts happening is the governance review. Again, we're going to look for those. We're going to look for those keywords. We're going to start that filtering. We're going to see what doesn't apply to us, exclude that. Once it gets into pre-prod release, those ownership assignments are going to go out. And we're going to start with bug fixes. We're going to start with security validations, and integration impacts. Again, the stability of the operation is the priority. And then you can see that flowing through. What I want to point out is I've intentionally stacked the efforts, because you can see this is happening while payroll is processing. This is happening during month-end close. So who is doing what? Those owners, right? Is it your functional lead created the script to give to the technical folks to run these and to run the test and report back? That goes back to the earlier slide. Who's doing what when? Because your finance team may very well be in month-end close and cannot coordinate the testing, or your payroll team may be processing payroll. October is another example. Your benefits team may be in open enrollment. So who's doing what when? This is just another example of that, of when information arrives into production. I picked this as well because we have a holiday here. We have another tax filing day where employees may also be distracted for one reason or another. The other reason why I like this visual as an opportunity is look at the week of the 5th, right? We have a lot of things going on. But that Wednesday, the 1st, you can see defect retesting. And I'll go back. The feedback loop is critical here. For customers that have pre-prod, that are getting Infor information, you are helping the larger ecosystem. Again, we provide the hammer, you swing it and hit the nail. Everybody's swing may be a little bit different. Everybody's goal is to hit the nail, right? So how you're using the tool, I call it in the wild, may be different from your peers, but hitting the nail, you may expose something that helps the larger ecosystem. So pre-prod is where, again, that relationship, that mutual, those cycles of mutual benefit show up as well. The earlier you test in pre-prod, the sooner Infor gets feedback and can deliver updates. Also, the sooner that we're updating known issue KBs. So this is a real world example of how testing benefits everyone. And again, just going back here, the other thing I want to focus on is our adoption catalog. So now you see we've gone through the first gate, bug fixes, updates, regulatory updates, but we never forget about new features. We immediately see organizations that do this well say, well, what is out there new that we want to test? Where do we want to put this? How do we want to consider it? When do we want to meet with the business owners to say yay or nay? That happens as part of this cycle immediately. So no enhancement gets left behind. Every enhancement or potential benefit and upgrade to the solution gets a disposition in these organizations. This is just again a smaller kind of condensed overview. It's governance and testing cadence, and it just aligns back to the to what we just saw in detail on the calendar, right? Again, as an Inforian, but also as someone who uses the system every day to do their job as well. That number 4, that is in the middle, that's a linchpin, right? Information goes out, it comes back. The sooner we get it, the sooner we can make updates, or we can advise you on how to have alternative paths to have the least amount of impact to production. So I've talked a little bit, and I've alluded a little bit to all of the way that this information has benefited customers to use tools to enhance this, right? This isn't anything Infor has done. We have heard from customers how they take these release notes, load them in. Some customers use Excel and macros. I believe that was the path for Cooper. They have a really good presentation from Connect, I believe is on the communities. You can see what they were able to automate. Legacy, I believe, uses a SharePoint and Teams approach. If you have Jira and ServiceNow, those are also opportunities to use to automate some of this information and streamline this process. So again, just a way to iterate and elevate, and what have others done in the real world. Now that we've moved a little bit past bugs and defects and regulatory, let's talk about those feature adoptions, right? Dispositioning the feature adoptions is key. This is part of the release process. It is on the calendar, right? It is no enhancement left behind. So we're going to discover it. We're going to look at KBs. We're going to do an assessment. What does that look like for the business? Right? That may be where there's another governance council. You get your SMEs and your functional leaders together. Does this have value? And then we're going to decide, do we adopt? Right? This is great. I've been waiting on this. This is an enhancement I put in. Right? That's adopt. Do we defer? Nice to have, but we don't have time right now. Decline. It really doesn't bring us any value, or we have a process in place and it may have some configurations, but ripping that out and adopting this feature, the juice just isn't worth the squeeze. And then we move on to, if you're adopting or you're deferring, you're scheduling it, you're testing it, you're enabling it, and then obviously you're going to go through that governance process once you're done. And like with anything else, it'll have its own calendar. It'll have windows to avoid. You'll have testing windows, and you'll need to schedule around other releases. How are you strategic with these? So, a couple of different ways, right? If you have a customer success manager and account manager, highly recommend you do roadmap check-ins. Now, we do know that roadmaps are things that can move and shift, but if there are big rocks out there, we really try to stick to those dates. And if they are going to move, again, part of your strategic planning. There's the Infor community sites where we can provide feedback. You can also engage with other customers. The innovation insights where you can join concierge KBs. I should also have said training. Go out there and look at the training, see how this is modeled. There's also groups that we have. So again, going back to that partnership, we have customer advisory boards and then your own internal governance. Again, not anything that necessarily as a software provider that Infor does, but seeing how things mature and working with customers, these are just those nuggets to share where we've seen them be difference makers. And then this is just illustrating the cost of ignoring new features, right? It compounds. Just an example, right? Release one may have 25% new features, and so on and so forth. You may unintentionally be perpetuating manual work, or your peers may be advancing, and your experience with the platform is staying stagnant. So, and this is very real. As an Inforian, I talk to tons of customers, and hearing the customer experience based off of feature adoptions is exciting on one hand for those that take advantage, and it's disappointing on the other hand because you know that there's relief, but there's just not a process in place that's been matured enough for them to take advantage of that. So having governance like this and models like this alleviates those that are kind of gone live and put a pin in it. Time to take that pin out and start to elevate and mature the solution. And then this is just a readiness, right? If you're going to make a decision, If you're going to know if something is good to go, this is an example of how those customer change advisory boards and readiness scorecards are used. Again, it's very data driven. Inconvenience to business processes is definitely a factor. Impact in terms of size, scope, etc. And then risk, right? Risk tolerance. The other thing that I would say is one thing, again, that I heard from the customers is start small. This is a marathon, not a sprint. Take some of these suggestions, even if it's one or two, and try to implement them if you don't have them. Get active in your communities, right? Ask what your peers are doing. Some of what I'm sharing, again, came directly from other customers. And then start to show our model in action, right? A day in the life, right? What does this look like? Plan this out. What would the technical lens be? The release notes arrive. The triage ownership starts. The bug fix, pre-prod validation, feedback to Infor. Again, this is just a quick takeaway for you guys to have to go back and talk internally. Like, do we have this covered? Is this something we're doing? Why is this important? Without the operating model, you can see in the red. Your timing is going to be compromised. You may make assumptions that miss critical things. You'll have an incomplete process to manage change. Even though, again, sometimes the change advisory board is more about adopting new features, introducing updates and regulatory and bug defects is change. You're still introducing change. And at the end of the day, the value lost. All of those things are offset. I don't need to read it to you on the other side of the operating model. The other thing we would say is kind of to the point that was on the calendar. What does a feature backlog actually look like? Here's an example, right? Here's a feature, here's the module, who owns it, and how did we disposition it? So no one ever has to wonder, did we look at this? You could go back, you can keep track of this. And if the team member for talent comes back and says, why didn't we use this new feature? You have it dispositioned out. Here's when we looked at it. Here's when we decided. And here's how we rated it. So everyone is in the know, and those stakeholders that are involved have a timeline to go back to or to plan to. And then I always just add this because as Infor, we use a lot of acronyms. I said KB, I said ION, I'm using CAB all over the place. This is just so that we're speaking the same language. No need to translate. I like to put these at the end of my presentations. Hi, Heather. I might have the wrong date on there. I'll update it before I send it out. Oh, thanks, Brian. Very informative. I'm glad. Also, again, major shout out to Cooper and Legacy. Some of their lessons learned that they shared at Connector there. They also have their presentation, I believe, on the communities as well. So you can marry that together. And I encourage you all to be active and involved, and grow from others' lessons learned. And I thank you very much for your time today.